Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the issue of the anti-deportation riots, anti-ICE riots. No King's protest, call it what you like, but the street level mobs in the United States, but also elsewhere around the West. The funding for anti-white, anti-Western rioting and street mobs and unlawful activity, assaulting officers. The funds and the infrastructure for that seems to be infinite. But if two or three white people get together and want to wave a English flag or something like that, then the police are on the spot arresting them. So we're living in an absolute inversion of what's useful and healthy for Western societies. But coming to the riots or the assaulting ICE officers, impeding their vehicles, and having mobs outside ICE detention centres and deportation centres, and throwing Molotov cocktails and goodness knows what, throwing whatever objects, bricks and rocks at ICE officers and ICE vehicles and the like. Now, I become irritated in the extreme and annoyed when I see that the mobs always seem to be one step ahead, much better organised, far more numerous, far more effective, if you like, in their disruption activities than ICE is, or the FBI is, or DOJ, call it what you like. But the forces that are meant to counter the law enforcement that are meant to counter or neutralise these rioters, very well funded, very well organised rioters, that DOJ response or ICE response seems to be totally inadequate. Now, they've had long enough now to gauge the extent. ICE and DOJ have had plenty long enough to gauge and assess the extent of the unlawfulness, its funding, its organisation, and yet their response seems to be, I have to say, the least ineffective. Not that some arrests aren't being made, there are, but those arrests don't seem to be even the slightest, have the slightest deterrent effect on others. For every one person that they arrest, there are two more activists that appear on the street. So again, the arresting isn't a deterrent, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But it's even worse than that, because there's various footage taken by private observers where they can watch activists, assaulting ICE officers, throwing rocks, throwing Molotov cocktails, using laser beams to disrupt, ICE officers, and all manner of things to disrupt and impede or prevent, including assaulting the officers, and yet these people are able to walk away. I mean, there are now numerous videos where an activist, a street rioter, can engage in a series of illegal acts, all of which would justify arrest. And yet they're able to just, when they're finished, you finish their shift, they're able to just walk away and walk down the street, in masks and fully covered face. But they're able to walk away, and they've been followed for a few blocks, and they get into another vehicle that's waiting there that appears to be a supplied vehicle. And then they just drive off, and no penalty, there's no arrest, there's nobody follows them, no law enforcement officers are following them to find out where they live so that a warrant can be issued and they can be arrested later, none of that sort of thing. Now, that's the level of organisation and follow-up that ICE needs to do, at a minimum, for goodness sakes. And yet, as far as I can tell, they're not doing it. Why not? It's obvious that level of organisation is needed if they're going to combat these people, and combat the rioters and the disruptors and the people breaking the law and in preventing ICE from doing their legally mandated duty as voted into law by the Congress of the United States. So that I find that irritating. Why are you not organised to do that? I mean, that is obviously what's needed, yet you're not doing it. So, piss ass 2-bit mob rioters and so on are able to commit these crimes and again walk away with impunity. That's not good enough. It's just not. There appears to be a line, as far as I can tell, where ICE is only making arrests if an officer is actually assaulted or something at that level of severity. But anything else, saying, no, we're not going to worry about that. But yes, you should worry about it. If the other side is prepared to send a fucking SWAT team, body armor, automatic weapons, the whole 9 yards, to go and chase after a Christian that was praying outside of an abortion clinic, if an entire SWAT team can be sent to arrest that guy, who's not a threat to anybody, by the way, if an entire SWAT team can be sent to arrest, a 70-year-old former advisor to Donald Trump, where the media tipped off, and at a dawn raid and with full drama and carry on, then this is the level of, that's the level of organisation and targeting and drama they're prepared to go to, and that's chasing after people who've committed no crimes. So these rioters and so on are committing and have committed and are continuing to commit crimes, and the response needs to be in proportion to the level of organisation, and there needs to be follow-up teams there to identify these rioters. And if you can't identify them by face, you can identify them by the their walking gait, GAIT, the way they walk, and their people are often very easily identifiable by that, and go and follow these, find out where they live, get the vehicle registration of the vehicles that they're driving and all that sort of stuff, and do that follow up. And these people need to be arrested. Now, some are saying, well, these are only the foot soldiers, these are just the goons, these are just the silly little useful fools that are used as frontline cannon fodder. They're not the real decision makers. And so, no, I get that, totally understand that. That doesn't mean you don't arrest them, though. Now, the next level is who's paying for these people's legal fees? Because for some reason, these are people who, and remember, a lot of them are government employees, teachers and that sort of thing. What is it that why are they not afraid? Why are they not concerned about being arrested for brazen political violence on the street? Now, I would be. I mean, it may mean I could never get a job again, as in a criminal record or something. I'd be up for many thousands of dollars in legal fees. That's part of the Democrat, globalist playbook when they go after people on the right, is to, even if we don't convict you of something, the process will cause you that much stress. You'll be bankrupted. You'll be fucked. So we'll get you one way or another. If we can't put you in prison, we'll bankrupt you and cause you, serious emotional and psychological scarring. It'll take years to, that sort of stuff. And they know that. They know that's their playbook, and they know it. No, I'm not suggesting that level of callousness and premeditated callousness. It's the mark of the ideological fanatic, that sort of behaviour, and the Democrats do that. We don't like what you believe or think, and we'll find a way of getting at you. The communists in the Soviet Union and so on used to do all sorts of things like that. So we haven't committed a crime, but it just so happens that your mother in the nursing home is going to suddenly find that we've lost her paperwork, and we'll just put her on the street at the height of winter. What are you going to do then, motherfucker? That type of thing. And that's they use those sort of things to bring people to heel. Again, people that hadn't committed a crime, just people who believe the wrong thing. Now, these folks on the street are committing crimes. The people who fund them are committing crimes, and the people who provide the organisation, the infrastructure for them to commit these crimes are also, by extension, committing crimes. So let's follow through on this. Now, there's also a lot of talk about, well, the people that provide the funding, they don't know what the money's being used for, and they're not. Hey, it's dark money and it's being pooled, and they can't be held responsible. well, I don't know. If you guys in DOJ can't get it together, give me a call. Okay, I'll come and do it for you, for fuck's sake. Now, the situation is this: for example, you arrest one of these agitators or rioters. Now, the equipment they've got is all being paid for. Someone's paid for that. Where did they get that equipment from? Did they buy it? If so, where did that money come? Go over their bank accounts. Where did that money come from? Who paid for this? If you picked it up at some locale, where was that location? Who was your contact to get there? Where did you find it? Look at who manufactured this stuff. Did they get a big order recently for body armor or masks or I don't know, whatever, and then find out and start isolating it that way. It can take quite a bit of detective work, and I accept that, but it's not like the DOJ is absent resources. For goodness sakes. And when the Democrats were controlling the DOJ, they had infinite resources to go and chase after anyone they didn't like. And so the DOJ, in this time around, should have sufficient resources to go after brazen lawbreakers. So when someone, one of these street goons gets arrested, follow through everything. Where did they go? The script you've got, where did that come from? Okay, you went somewhere to get trained. Where? Who are the people there? Who was your contact? And just and keep them there. Interrogate the crap out of them, but get information that can then you can follow up the food chain. Now, it won't take long before you find that money's been allocated by, say, the Tides Foundation. Now, the claim is that something in the region of between 250 and 300 million US dollars has been made available to the activist, street activist network here across the United States. Now, I don't know whether that's just for the Antifa mobs, outside of the ICE detention centres, or that's to include things like the No Kings protest or other protest activity. It's harder to say exactly, dollar for dollar where that money goes. But nonetheless, it's a very decent chunk of money. And so where did that money come from? Now, the talk is, well, the Tides Foundation is doing okay. All right, then, well, if the Tides Foundation, for example, if the Tides Foundation is, as is claimed by some, directly funding this activity or giving the money to groups that organise and fund the street goons, then by extension, Tides is culpable. Okay, well, why is the Tides Foundation tax exempt? Why is it that all donations to the Tides Foundation are tax deductible? Now, that's a very, very simple administrative measure that can be taken there. Would the so-called philanthropists, would they donate money to the Tides Foundation if it was not tax deductible, if they took the hit directly on the chin? Now, some would, but typically they're not going to. So if they give for example, if they give $50 million to the Tides, they can write $50 million off on their tax. Maybe they owe $50 million in tax anyway to the IRS, but rather than give the money to the tax man or to the Internal Revenue Service, they think, well, okay, I'll give $50 million to Tides, and Tides can do the fund the street level activism, and I get a tax deduction. What could be more beautiful than that? But if Tides is not tax exempt, and other groups like them is not tax exempt, that's a whole different matter. So there are administrative things can be done at the taxation level to make donation to these groups unattractive. Now, if there are now remember, there's a massive network of international NGOs that are involved in one way or another at this, this activism and protest and disruption and unlawful activity. A lot of those are tax exempt. Well, deal with that. You're not fucking tax exempt anymore, buddy. If you want, and part of the tax exempt thing, by the way, is you don't engage in political activism, you engage in charity work. Now, dressing up goons to throw Molotov cocktails outside a a nice facility. Last time I checked, that wasn't charity work. So cut off their tax exempt status there. Now, again, who's paying for the bits and pieces? For example, there was when the BLM and so on riots were going on, there were organisations that were, truckloads of placards and various other bits and pieces were being delivered, and pallets of bricks were being delivered for use of throwing against law enforcement officers and government buildings and so on. Now, some of this information was documented. I remember even hearing about it on Tucker Carlson's show when he was on Fox, and he was even giving the names of the people that were doing it. Have any of those people been followed up and questioned since? Now the Republicans are in the controlling the DOJ, and if they haven't been followed up, why not? There was a young woman who was driving that truck delivering a lot of that stuff. Who paid for it? The truck was rented. Who paid for that rental? Was it a charity? Because if it was a charity, then they're tax exempt. They need to be untax exempted quick smart. Why is that young woman not being interrogated and questioned? What was her role in this? Did she knowingly deliver, or was instrumental in delivering, things like bricks and other rioting equipment? Because if she did know, then why is she not in prison? And there's a lot of things ICE and the DOJ and someone can do. Why are they not doing it? It's obvious these things need to be done. Now, over 20 years ago now, I was noticing street marches. So this has been common knowledge for a long time. Over 20 years ago, I noticed these street marches that were I didn't know they were being organised by globalists back then. I thought I knew something was going on, but I didn't know exactly what. I just knew they were organised and funded and so on. And what I noticed, again, more than 20 years ago, was that how many government employees were being given the day off to go on these so-called protests and riots, and how they're being protected by state or regional or local governments. You have our permission to go out and riot and spread mayhem, and your job is safe. You won't be prosecuted. That alone, in my view, is conspiracy to foment and commit law breaking through rioting and so on. So why are government operatives not being prosecuted or at very least fired? So there's a lot of government employees and these things given the day off. A lot of university students and even senior high school students were being openly given, you can have the day off to go rioting. Now they might phrase it as protesting, but schools are actually given the day. It's meant to be certainly in parts of Australia, it's illegal if you take a day off or time off school without there being a reason. For example, you're ill or sick or something like that. But instead, senior high school teachers were brazenly encouraging the kids to be protesters and activists and street activists, and to say, well, you should be filled with outrage. The illegitimacy of such and such or so and so, or Trump, or this or that. Nazis are everywhere. It's your duty to get out there and wave a placard and scream and shout. Is it? Where are these Nazis? Where is this illegitimacy? So these are people who are directly fomenting and directly encouraging social division and to gin up faux outrage over outrages that don't even exist, that they've invented, for fuck's sake. So that's something I noticed. I also noticed the organising structure behind it, the people, the organisers, the chief stirrers and agitators with the bullhorns and the scripts and the chants and so on. I'd noticed that some of them were operating in Sydney on one day, then they're at the other end of Australia in the next. So there's clearly a nucleus of professional agitators. Who's paying for them? University students are given the day. In some university courses, particularly the sociology ones, the kids are told, if you go out and protest today, I'll give you a credit on your paper. Or, on your exam and so on, or your assignment. I'll recraft your assignment into being an assignment to go out and wave placards. You'll get a credit for it just by turning up. So the university infrastructure was supporting it. Why? Go after these people, for fuck's sake. This has been going on for decades. So, and then I watched the amount of like buses and so on that were bussing in the activists. Would these activists have turned up if they had to find their own way there? Probably not. So there's this whole area, and the local government was putting aside a parking area for like 40, 50 buses that were holding 70 people per bus, and so 3,000 people were being delivered just who was paying for those buses? Why did the local government allocate this parking area for them? They couldn't have mustered and had a jump off point so close to the protest area if the local government hadn't colluded. Why was the local government colluding? The local government managerial and administrative staff, part of the deep state, and so on. These are all questions that need to be asked, investigated, and charges brought against these people, if indeed the law has been broken and is determined to have been broken in an independent, impartial court of law. So. Also, I watched now a lot of people, there has to be latrines for them to use. There has to be food and water brought. This was a fairly warm day, so there were people driving around in NGO vehicles delivering, like sandwiches and fruit and bottled water, that sort of thing, to the rioters. Who was paying for those vehicles? Who was paying for that food? Who's paying for that water? You're looking at easily 6,000 to 7,000 bottles of water being delivered, to the rioters on just on the day that I was looking at it. And so you multiply that out. So even if they were buying it at bulk level discounts, we're still talking, just to put that riot on would have cost well over $100,000. But in addition to that, the people who, a lot of the government employees and also the other people, they were being paid a taxpayer-funded salary, and their job isn't to go out and wave placards and riot. Their job is to deliver public services to the public. So there's a whole lot of things, a whole network of things to look at here. And again, that's been around for decades. So why is that not being investigated? I would argue that ICE is not doing enough. What they're doing isn't sufficiently well organised, and they need to lift their game substantially and deal with these rioters. And if you can't fucking do it, call me and I'll do it. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.